I'm Greg Grugan in Houston.
I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas.
And I'm Rudy Koski in Austin, and this is Texas, The Issue Is.
The divisive and seemingly intractable challenge of border security and immigration reform have lingered unsolved in our nation for decades. Enter Texas Senator John Cornyn, who's making a long-shot attempt to stake out sensible middle ground while also speaking out firmly on Chinese aggression, the war in Ukraine, and the debt ceiling.
Most people will not allow.
In the nation's capital, the Lone Star State senior senator has shouldered what many call the Herculean challenge of forming limited bipartisan consensus as a means of easing the border crisis plaguing not just Texas, but the entire country.
Well, I think that's why I got elected, to take on tough tasks and to see if we can find some common ground. The sad fact is, Greg, though, that given the president's open border policies and what's been happening at the border, it's made it much harder for us to find that common ground. But I think it all starts with border security. I visited with some of our Texas congressmen and asked them, please send us a border security bill as soon as you can. And then we can begin to look here in the Senate for building a bipartisan consensus to get us to 60 votes. As a practical matter, that's the only way we can get anything through the Senate, and then hopefully to the president. But I agree, it's a uphill task, but it all starts with border security. The border is more complex than I think many people acknowledge, because you have a certain number of people who are coming to the border, economic migrants and the like. You have some people who are claiming asylum, and really it's our asylum system along with the catch and release policies of the administration that continue to encourage more and more people to come, even though those who eventually appear in front of an immigration judge, only about 10% of them qualify. The problem is many of the rest just sort of melt into the great American landscape. But I think if we could start by fixing the broken asylum system, that would be a good start.
Cornyn insists the price of continued congressional inaction and stalemate will be painful and human.
We've seen the drugs that have taken the lives of 108,000 Americans coming across that border. And so I suspect many of those so-called gotaways are drug mules running drugs into the interior of the United States.
As for the looming battle over the debt ceiling, Cornyn says the $31 trillion in red ink already weighing down our government's books should trigger a nationwide call for fiscal restraint.
As a result of COVID, we saw a huge increase in federal spending on a bipartisan basis. Of course, this was an emergency, a public health and an economic emergency, and we responded accordingly. But in the last 2 years, the administration and Democrats in the Senate and the House has spent almost another $3 trillion. The position that the president is taking, that he won't negotiate, is simply unsustainable, and it's irresponsible.
On the issue of aid for Ukraine, Cornyn fully supports provision of advanced American weaponry, including the M1 Abrams battle tank.
We need to continue to help them because Mr. Putin is not going to stop. If there was a pause in the fighting, or if there was a temporary peace, then he would use that to reset and replenish his munitions and weapons and then continue his march across Europe.
And when it comes to the economic and geopolitical threat posed by China, Cornyn is calling on the nation to escalate preemptive measures as a security imperative.
We need to win the next war by preventing the next war, and the only way we do that is by deterrence and by strength. As Ronald Reagan said, peace through strength. And frankly, we're not ready.
Okay, guys, my one-word description is measured. Stephen, what's your word?
My one word is compromise.
All right, Koski, lay it on me.
All right, Greg, you have said the senator is facing a Herculean challenge. Well, my word then is Odysseus.
Welcome back. Statesman John Cornyn is attempting to replicate the pragmatic bipartisan compromise he helped craft last year on school safety. But the challenges of porous border security and illegal immigration have been festering unaddressed for a very long time. Rudy, what do you make of Cornyn's effort, and is there any appetite for it with either caucus?
Greg, I fear the next few years, especially in the Senate, is going to play out like a Greek tragedy. That's why my word is Odysseus. Senator Cornyn is like that epic warrior of literature who struggled to get home after that battle in Troy, but now the battle is inside the Beltway and everyone is dug in deep with their own political party agenda. Now, when you have the president's spokesperson claiming no one is walking across the border, remember that? Gosh, the vice president, who's the designated border czar, offering no real options, hard right Republicans wanting to deport every dreamer kid. Well, the status quo seems to win out, right? Maybe it's going to take a ramp up of border busing programs in more cities, 2 more cities to get national conversations going, and maybe some more crossings out of Canada, which that's happening, right? That's happening right now. We're starting to see an uptick on that to get some type of comprehensive reform plan in place. But gosh, it's almost like battling a cyclops, right?
Stephen, Americans have been bombarded with images from the border of folks literally just walking into their country. Beyond Texas, do you sense any urgent national demand for action?
I don't think nationally we have to remember we're in Texas, which is a border state. Of course, we're seeing it more than some others. Now, it is a national conversation. It's a national security issue. I said compromise because I think there could be some type of compromise. But as Rudy mentioned, this is a Congress that's now divided. The House is in Republican control, even though it's slim, and the Senate remains in Democrat control. But I think, and this just may be being optimistic, that this is one issue that there could be compromise, but I don't know if that compromise will be such a landmark decision that will actually make a real change on the border.
Okay, guys, on the debt ceiling, Cornyn calls President Biden's spending unsustainable and irresponsible. Rudy, how will this game of chicken play out?
I fear it's going to end up with us chickens who are trying to cross the road getting run over or fried. We're going to get more from the Democrats, their dog whistle blowing of they're coming for your Social Security, like the cry from the right. They're coming for your guns. And in the end, what I think we're going to see is a funding plan that's going to get passed and a debt level going up, growing without any real reductions. Greg?
All right, Stephen, if there is any consensus to be found in Congress these days, it seems to be focused on the dual threat of China and Putin. What do you make of Cornyn's warning that we are not sufficiently strapped up as a nation for a major conflict?
Right, and then you also heard, and you called him a statesman, you also heard he talked about the big goal is to not get to a war. I think that is something where we will have bipartisanship of Democrats and Republicans recognizing, especially with the whole balloon fiasco with China, recognizing that even though we rely on China for some things, China is not our friend from a political standpoint, and of course not Russia with the U.S. aiding Ukraine. And so I think if anything that will happen in the next 2 years, I think there will be some bipartisanship on making sure that the line is definitively drawn in the sand as it pertains to China and Russia.
Okay, Rudy, you talk to a lot of regular folks. Is the potential threat posed by China and Putin, for that matter, even on the radar for most Texans?
My mama noticed it. I think that the balloon did catch a lot of attention for the average person. We all saw it. It wasn't a theatrical threat from anyone. We saw it. But the next crisis is going to be a new windstorm. A price hike is going to come. And that eventually is going to cause the next distraction. So I don't think that this balloon crisis is going to float over into the next election cycle.
Quickly, guys, do you think Cornyn is not going to run for another term? Stephen?
I think he won't.
Rudy?
I think that this is it. I think that he wants to go out on top, get a win, and then come home.
All right, let's leave it there. To see this interview and others, go to our Fox Station's YouTube pages.
And continue the conversation with us on social media.
Next week on Texas The Issue Is, we tackle the debate over school choice. We'll have that next week. Be sure to let us know what you think the issue is.